Welcome to California in Focus. I'm Keegan Kernodle. Joining me today is the California-based reporter for the Center Square, Kenneth Strutt. So, Kenneth, LA is building skyscrapers for the homeless. Who's paying for this?
Every American is going to pay for this through Section 8 vouchers, federally funded. That could probably add up to about $1.2 billion over the building's lifetimes. That's how the city, the state, the investors for the building, the developers for the building are all going to get paid back for the $429 million construction costs. All of this is happening, though, as actual construction in Los Angeles for apartments has collapsed. In August 2022, there were 61 apartment building starts in the LA metro area. August 2025, only 35. So that's a 43% decline. And when you look at this program, the costs are just mind-boggling, right? There's one of these three towers. It's costing $866,000 per unit for homeless people. These are like mostly studios, a few one-bedrooms. So keep that in mind. That's more than the median home sale price. So the per foot construction cost is over $1,000 a square feet, which is what you would pay for very high-end construction in maybe Bel Air or Brentwood. But this is homeless housing in Skid Row, which downtown Los Angeles, it does have the highest concentration of homeless individuals in the nation. But this massive cost just really begs the question, is this a good use of taxpayer funding? Who is profiting from this? And why are we doing this? So I spoke to the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association Vice President of Communications, Susan Shelley, about this. She had a lot of questions about the spending on this, but also tied this to something called Measure ULA. In 2022, this is the magic year here, Los Angeles or LA voters decided to pass what was called a mansion tax. This was a 4% or higher transfer tax on all properties worth over $5 million. And they called it a mansion tax. But it's not really a mansion tax because it applies to all property. That applies to if you want to sell your strip mall. That applies to if you want to sell your apartment building. Even if it's a small one, $5 million isn't going to go very far in somewhere like Los Angeles, where the cost of land, the cost of construction is very expensive. So as a result, and as I've noted before, overall construction starts have completely collapsed in Los Angeles. Housing that is being built is overwhelmingly all government income restricted or government subsidized. So the private sector market rate housing starts in Los Angeles. It is looking very bad. A lot of real estate development companies have investors have redlined the city of Los Angeles for investment because of not just Measure ULA, which uses these funds to fund eviction protections and eviction legal services, pay for homeless services, and pay for more government housing. That's going to be built by more developers who specialize in these special kind of government relationship contracts, which does bring up this other issue here, right? Which is that for building these towers for the homeless downtown, one of them is 19 stories tall. The developers are earning tens of millions of dollars in fees for doing this. There are lots of tax exempt bonds that are being sold for the project. I think each of these has tens of millions of dollars of tax exempt bonds that banks are earning commission from selling, and that investors pretty much get guaranteed returns because it's all going to be paid for by the federal taxpayer with these HUD vouchers. This one building that cost $171 million got a 20-year voucher agreement worth $194 million. The life cycle of these buildings is 55 years. That's the covenant in these documents. It's supposed to be affordable for 55 years, most likely going to be funded by HUD for 55 years. So if you expand that to the 55-year life cycle of the building, that one building built for $171 million is going to be getting $500 million in HUD vouchers over its lifetime. So that's how the city is going to get paid back. The city put forward some money for these buildings, tens of millions of dollars or more for these buildings. The state is putting up tens of millions of dollars more for these buildings. These aren't for the most part, grants. These are loans. The city is just going to get this money back from the federal taxpayer, at least if these agreements are renewed or if HUD continues to sign these. And if they're not renewed, if HUD doesn't approve these vouchers, maybe it thinks it's not a good use of taxpayer money, then what's going to happen with these towers? Are they going to be empty? Who's going to get paid back? Who's going to take a haircut? Those could all be some very difficult questions that we face. HUD has made some major changes into its programs, one of which is to limit voucher use to only a few years instead of unlimited. I think, as we have discussed before in our earlier articles, the average tenancy for somebody who gets in Section 8 is over 10 years. And there are cases where there have been multi-generational households that have lived on HUD for generations. So, I mean, there is this one lady who spoke to the current HUD secretary who said that she was born into Section 8, she grew up in Section 8, and she's now raised her kids in Section 8. And if there are time limits put onto these vouchers, then you could, and there are more restrictions on how these vouchers are going to be. Should permanent supportive housing, which is what these projects are, should somebody be able to get a free apartment for life if they get into this building? And who should be paying for that? And what level of services should they provide? Is a voucher-based apartment building the best way to do this? Or are there alternative facilities that are more specialized that might be more appropriate, such as a mental health setting? We have this major issue in Los Angeles and California in general of drug-induced psychosis. There's meth-induced psychosis, the new formulation of meth from the prior method of cooking this meth from drugstore ingredients to the mass production of meth in Mexico from materials imported from China that are then smuggled across the border, which is much cheaper, much more potent, but also induces psychosis. That's been a major problem. Marijuana-induced psychosis is something that we're now starting to learn about much more. So there are a lot of people who have irreparable drug-induced psychosis or psychosis that must be managed in a professional setting where medication is monitored. And these people are kept safe both from themselves, and the public is kept safe from a lot of what they might do to others. So this is a very complicated issue. We're looking at taxpayer funding really being used to get developers rich, maybe to shift costs from the city and state for its own policy actions. Why are there so many homeless people in Los Angeles' Skid Row? How many of those people are even from Los Angeles County? Where did they become homeless? It is true that a lot of states do ship their homeless to California, knowing that we are going to pay for it. Maybe it is fair if federal taxpayers are footing the bill, because it could largely be a federal problem. We stopped collecting a lot of this data on where people are from a few years ago. It's unclear why we did that. Maybe we should start doing that in Los Angeles again so we have a better picture. Until we figure out how we actually want to address this problem and get better data on what's happening, then it does seem like that the federal taxpayer will be on the hook for over $1 billion in these HUD payments for these 3 skyscrapers for the homeless in downtown Los Angeles.
Well, thank you, Kenneth, for your reporting on this. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. And this has been another episode of California in Focus.